Hey guys, and welcome to this video on Pluto in the 12th house. If you have Pluto in the 12th house in your astrology chart, this video is for you. I'm Cassandra, the Saffron Sage, helping you use astrology to evolve, and let's get into Pluto in the 12th house. Today we'll talk about the mythology of Pluto, the nature of Pluto as a planet, the meaning of the 12th house, and then we will get into all about what it means when you have Pluto, the planet of transformation, in the 12th house of the subconscious mind, dreams, and many, many other things, which we will talk about. So let's get into the video. So for the mythology of Pluto, when I was doing research into this, the one story that did pop up the most was the Persephone myth. And so the Persephone story is about how Pluto kidnapped Persephone. Pluto was lord of the underworld, so he took her to the underworld where she became queen. The way the story goes is that he kidnapped her. Her mom, Ceres or Demeter, depending on which myth you follow, got upset and came to find her daughter and save her and bring her back home. And Pluto had to make this deal that he would let her go. And he did make the deal. But he was able to get her to eat pomegranate seeds, which, so the story goes, maybe she didn't know this sealed her fate in staying in the underworld, because for every seed she ate, she had to stay a certain amount of time. So then when Pluto let her go, then she only had to go 6 months. So now Persephone goes 6 months to stay with her mother Demeter above ground in the earth, and then she goes for 6 months down to do her stay in the underworld. Demeter, being known as like the mother, the nurturer, the one who harvests the crops, is happy when her daughter is there. And so for the 6 months that Persephone is with Demeter, this is when we have spring. This is when things grow. Things are bountiful. And then when Persephone goes to the underworld, those 6 months are known as winter, where Demeter or Ceres is, just so depressed, so bereft without her daughter that she can't do anything. And that is when we have winter. So Persephone, the Persephone myth is not just about a poor damsel in distress who gets taken away and kidnapped. One disclaimer here is that there are some versions of this story that say that Persephone went willingly. So the moral of the Persephone myth here is that the maiden turns into the mother, who turns into the crone. It's about the innocent, naive young girl who doesn't know how to be responsible for her own self, becoming queen of that underworld by mastering her subconscious mind and becoming a woman. And so again, this is not necessarily a damsel in distress story as much as it is a story about coming into power, making the journey from powerlessness to power, which is really what Pluto is all about. So more little details about this story that I didn't know. One is that the reason Pluto fell in love with Persephone is that Cupid shot a dart at him. And because he didn't want him to be lonely in the underworld watching over all these departed souls. More things about Pluto. Pluto is known as the god of wealth because jewels and diamonds come from underground. Pluto in Roman mythology. It's Hades in Greek mythology. And so Pluto's identity was really comprised of these two entities. One is Hades, but the other one is Pluton, also known as Dispater, who had power over the underworld and mineral wealth. The underworld being the resting place of departed souls. A little bit about Pluto's family tree. Here is that Pluto's dad was Saturn, his brother was Jupiter, who really freed him. Jupiter freed Pluto from the wrath of Saturn, so that's something to know. He was also brothers with Poseidon, and his sisters were Ceres, Juno, and Vesta. So that being said, that means Persephone was his niece. So now that we've talked about the mythology of Pluto, let's talk about what Pluto means as a planet in the chart in astrology. The first thing to know is that Pluto by sign is going to outline generational themes. These are going to be, and this is because Pluto moves very, very slowly. The transit of Pluto is 14 to 30 years. So because it is so slow, it represents generational themes. These are not aspects of the personality wherever your Pluto is. Where we find Pluto by house, this is how you moved through a past life. These are the themes that you're going to be probably most comfortable with, and the way that you could potentially transform in this life. Now, just because you have Pluto in a house does not mean that house of your life, that area of life, is guaranteed to transform, because the transformation isn't guaranteed. The Pluto placement in the chart just represents the potential, but doesn't mean you're going to realize that potential. Now, there is something called the polarity point, and this is from Jeffrey Wolf Green, and basically it's the opposite point, and it represents the soul evolution in this life. Now, this is how we transform and transcend the limits of the past, and you know, that's what it is. So then there's the polarity point. The polarity point of anyone's Pluto is the opposite point that it lands in the chart. So, you know, if your Pluto is at 20 degrees of Capricorn, then the polarity point is 20 degrees Cancer. It's the point directly across. And this is the energy to sort of learn how to allow, learn how to master, learn how to accept and work with, to really sort of realize the potential of your Pluto. And again, not everyone will do this, right? Some people will sort of stay in that energetic comfort zone of where their Pluto is by sign and house. So now let's go ahead and talk about what the 12th house means. The 12th house in astrology is a cadent house. The cadent houses are the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th house. The 12th house being the last house of the zodiac before the ascendant. This is a challenging house. It is known for its challenges, partly because it represents the things that are hard to see. And so oftentimes the planets in the 12th house are things that we have to really look hard to see within ourselves. Sometimes it can be known as the house of self-sabotage. So it's where we can be our own worst enemy. It also rules things like isolation. So this can range from things like meditating, the dream world, the subconscious mind, all the way to places of isolation like hospitals, jails, or any other place where we go when we are removed from society. Retreats also fall under this. The people with 12th house planets often really do need time alone to recharge. Sometimes the 12th house can represent loss. It can also be things like addiction or mental health or recovery. So now that we've covered some of the basic meanings of the 12th house, let's get into what it means when you have Pluto in the 12th. If you have Pluto in the 12th house, you may be somewhat secretive or reclusive. You might be someone who comes across like they're very mysterious. You might just have this air of mysteriousness that you sort of bring with you everywhere you go, this sort of mysterious aura going on. Sometimes people with Pluto in the 12th will have intense emotions because that 12th house rules the subconscious mind. And Pluto is the planet of intensity, so it brings intensity wherever it goes into the chart. With Pluto in the 12th, there is a very, very strong need to understand why, to get to the bottom of things, especially of your own self. If you have a problem with Pluto in the 12th, you might actually obsess about that problem and obsess about it until you get to a solution. The evolutionary side of this placement is about merging with source, merging with universal consciousness, being able to feel the connection of all things, and releasing whatever blocks you have from this ability. It's about connecting to a belief system that allows you to have transcendence, really understanding what it takes for you to transcend the needs of this world. Sometimes with people with this placement will feel this sense of being on the edge, even though they don't know what they're on the edge of or what the edge of that thing leads to. It's like standing on a cliff of the abyss and not knowing if you're going to jump, or if you do jump, where you're jumping to. So one of the challenges that can come with this Pluto placement is the dissolution of the ego, because in order to connect, you cannot be connected to all things if you have a very defined sense of self. So I think of the analogy of the drop of water in the ocean. We are all the drop of water, yet when we go back to the ocean, we become the whole ocean, right? This is like the connection between people and God, or us and source, however you want to look at it. With Pluto in the 12th house, you might start in life as that drop of water, but the point is to become the whole ocean, to be so connected to all that is, or source energy, or God, whatever you call it, that you cannot tell where you begin and it ends. And so one thing that comes with this Pluto in the 12th is a fear of loss of control. And it's almost like that soul desire to lose control gets disguised in the fear of that soul desire happening. So what can happen with this placement is you can sort of glom onto anything that makes you feel like you know who you are. You can attach very quickly to a certain thing being your identity. So there are issues of identity here. Even though this is not the house of identity, there is still almost a reaction to the soul's desire to merge and transcend that causes a insecurity of like, I gotta know who I am. And a challenge whenever something changes, transitional states where you're in between one identity and another and don't quite know who you are. Sometimes you can feel like something is missing and you don't know what it is. So again, you can over-identify with one aspect of yourself to cling to this sense of identity, this sense of being able to say, this is who I am. And the metaphor I'm getting, it's like holding on tightly to a tree and you're like, this is a tree, this is a tree, this is a tree. While at the same time, there's like a black hole you're being sucked into. This Pluto is about getting the experience of getting sucked into a black hole. Now, I'm not saying that to scare you guys, but there's a need to let go of all identities, all things that separate you from others. With this Pluto, you also have the ability to magnetize the attention of the collective consciousness. There is strong ability to connect with universal consciousness, the hive mind, whatever you want to call that. And every Pluto comes with a crisis. And with this Pluto in the 12th, the crisis is breaking down the ego, because the ego, the part of us that defines who we are, is also the part of us that stops us from connecting fully, being boundarylessness, having no edges. What this means is people with Pluto in the 12th will have situations that make them ask the question of, who am I? And when you're asking the question of, who am I, usually it's because whatever you just thought you were really wasn't. Whatever you just defined yourself as became nothing, or no longer exists, or you see the impermanence of it all. So with this Pluto in the 12th, there is an experience of meaninglessness. There is an experience of understanding that life is meaningless, not in the feudalistic way of like life has no meaning, but in the way of life has only the meaning we give it. There is no such thing as the meaning of life. This is a thing that perhaps the 12th house Pluto person could ponder. And there will be situations. This can be part of the crisis of this Pluto, is trying to grasp at something that just gives you meaning and not being able to hold it in your hands. But the crazy thing is, when you are in this place of total abyss or of total transition, which you may have one time in your life or more than one time, just depending, when you're in this place where things are changing and nothing is solid, there's some kind of magic that happens here. And something will bubble up from your soul that gives you a new way of relating to yourself. Something that didn't exist before. It does not come from outside. It does not come from hearing something someone else said, unless that thing you heard is to reflect on something that emerges from within. It's not something you can make happen. It just happens in those emptiness places of life, which everyone has to an extent, places where there's a transition. But for people with Pluto in the 12th, either the transitions will be stronger or the experience during the transition will be stronger. So this is something that just happens in that empty space, and it's part of the lesson that you're not just the drop in the ocean, that you are part of something bigger. So people with Pluto in the 12th house are definitely going to have experiences dealing with the subconscious mind, archetypes, dreams, the landscape of your inner world, symbolism, metaphor, psychology, all these deeper inner things. Now, some are going to do this on a quest to do this, and really I would say the highest vibration of Pluto in the 12th would be doing this intentionally, choosing to go on that journey. So anytime if you have Pluto in the 12th, you find yourself in the void or in this place of not knowing or in this place of transition. So anytime with this 12th house Pluto that you find yourself in the void, in a place of transition, there's a spiritual lesson of letting go of some facet of your identity, of some way that you've defined yourself to be that allows you to somehow open up to a greater experience of connection to the universe. And because faith is a lesson, that means you could have experiences in life that cause you to question your faith. Experiences of life of not having faith or railing against the concept of faith as part of the sort of entrance to some of these lessons. And you may have situations that bring you a sense of powerlessness. Every Pluto is going to make you feel powerless in that area of life. Pluto in the 12th house being the subconscious mind, that powerlessness can come as a lack of faith, or again, more a feeling of like not having control over what's happening. And that loss of control, if you look for it, you may be able to find this feeling that something will make this okay. And with this Pluto, you could come to see life as a sort of a dream, and wonder things about like whether we are living in a simulation, feeling like life really is a dream, because dreams are one of the significations of that 12th house. Pluto here really puts emphasis on dreams. So you could be more of a dreamer. You could care more about the psychological meaning of your own dreams. Or again, feel that feeling like life is a dream dreaming itself. Like, are we the dream? Are we the dreamer? Or are we simultaneously dreaming the dream as we are living it? For some people, not everyone watching this, but some people will have this placement and really struggle with the need to believe everything's okay when it isn't, because the 12th house tends to correlate to a rich fantasy life. And sometimes that can express in really feeling like, okay, everything's okay when something needs to be addressed. So sometimes the avoidance can be here, basically. Avoidance of things that are bad, wrong, or challenging to different degrees, depending on who you are watching this. So if you have that tendency to just see what you want to, part of the way to overcome this placement is really adapting perhaps more of a Stoic philosophy here of like seeing things as they are, allowing things to not be perfect, allowing things to just be the way they are. So the polarity point for this Pluto being the 6th house of like daily routines and habits means that for people with Pluto in the 12th, the solution to a lot of this sort of nebulous, challenges that deal with the subconscious mind relate to things that are very, very conscious or very, very focused, specifically learning techniques to connect to the divine. So people with this Pluto may be more drawn to things that don't involve techniques because usually we're more attached to the things that deal with the house of our Pluto. So, maybe you'd rather do a visualization that's totally unstructured, whereas for this Pluto placement, it might be more helpful. It might be more transcendent. You might evolve and step into the higher level of this Pluto if you were to just stare at a candle flame for 6 minutes, or do other techniques to connect to the divine that are specific, measurable, and very, very focused. Again, if you practice meditation with this placement, it's useful to experiment and see. It's possible that meditations that help you zoom in instead of zooming out can be more beneficial. There's also a need for the Pluto in the 12th house to do work a certain kind of work in the world that is useful. That sixth house is about being of service, and so is the 12th in a way. They're just in different ways. So on one hand, the 12th house Pluto person shouldn't avoid working, but they also shouldn't just take any job just because it's a job. It's at least if they're trying to evolve. If you're trying to evolve with this placement, you want to find a way to practice spiritual principles in your work, your job, what you do day to day, if you volunteer, whatever your role ends up being. There's a lot of evolutionary lessons that can be learned from being a part of a greater whole, from doing something small and specific and helpful, and being able to see how that helpfulness really plays its part in the world, really playing its part in the machine of the world working as it should. Not being a cog in the machine, but doing something where you're using your actual skills to make the world better in your own job, in your own way. So in this way, work can become the path to self-understanding or perhaps even enlightenment for some people with this placement. For some people with Pluto in the 12th, there's some kind of work you can do and be good at. There's the energy of apprenticeship here, of doing a craft, doing a skilled craft, or really putting a certain amount of focus in, I'm not even going to say it right, you guys, but what is it they do in Japan where when they're making the tea and they just focus on picking the leaves and they put everything into picking the leaves. And then when they're boiling the water, they put everything into, I can't think of what this is called. This concept of pouring all of your energy in the work that you do, not in a depleting way, but in a way that it's intentional work, spiritualizing work. That's what I'm talking about here. And you guys can comment below what this is called. There's a name for this. But it's about really doing that, really putting your soul, your heart and soul into what you do, just for the sake of being able to, be that productive member of society, be able to see how you fit in the scheme of the great whole. And this, I think, can alleviate some of the challenges that the 12th house Pluto person can have with their identity clinging to one thing as an aspect of who they are, to avoid almost or protect themselves from the fact that none of the roles here really mean anything at all when you zoom out largely enough. So the polarity point of this Pluto is about learning the right work, learning to live in alignment and harmony, learning to align your actions with something greater, and live in harmony with the rhythm of the universe. And this is something that can happen for people with Pluto in the 12th who are really working toward that sixth house polarity point. Some really beautiful things can open up with timing, with divine timing, with really being at this flow with the universe in a way where, yes, you're focused on a skill or something. You're not zoomed out that far, but you're living within the rhythm of the universe. So it's like you're in sync, and you might have some experiences that reflect back to you that feeling of being in sync. This placement, Pluto in the 12th house, is definitely a interesting placement where there are many layers of meaning and depth and psychology and meaninglessness that go into this placement. It is not a simple placement to have. You may naturally be drawn to have this intensity toward understanding why you are the way you are, or to understand deeply some of your own feelings. You might have that feeling like you're on the edge of the abyss, but you don't know what the edge is or the abyss is. Some of you may have had experiences where you plunged into the abyss and got to know what that felt like. For others, there's a sense of fear of losing your identity, while at the same time the soul desires to do exactly that and merge with the universe. And then there's also a zooming in point that you can focus on to align yourself with that polarity point in that sixth house of not just doing work for work's sake or to fill a role or to fill a paycheck, but to find how to apply spiritual principles to the work that you do every day. There's a real sense of meaning and connection and an alignment you can feel when you when you're doing this, and there's a potential here to really live in harmony with the universe. So let me know, you guys, if this video was helpful. I always love hearing from you. Let me know in the comments below if it resonated or you have more to add that I missed about this placement. I love hearing from you guys. You can also join my free webinar to find the gifts in your chart. That will be using the link below. So you can click the link below to join me for that. And that is all I have. Thank you so much for everyone who has been commenting, liking, sharing, subscribing, making donations. Everything you guys do, I appreciate you so much. And, you know, every time you guys comment on my videos, that is the one thing that helps me grow so much. And you guys are doing it. This channel has been growing so much faster lately. So thank you all for that support, and I will see you all in the next video.